Welcome to Principles with Cory and Logan, guys. We got a jammed-packed one here today. This is going to be an awesome one. I know you're going to gain a ton of value from our conversation today. We've got Captain William Toti with us today. He's a 26-year Navy veteran, served in positions all throughout and in industry, leading to a position as CEO of Sparton Corporation, and 26 years, like I said, as service in the U.S. Navy, and 15 years in industry, culminating as CEO of defense company. But today, he continues his journey as a sought-after consultant and authority on topics of military transition into industry. And that's one of the main things we're going to talk about today, along with leadership, because as you guys know, I love some leadership. He talks about the monstrous September 11th terrorist attack on the Pentagon, an unforgettable story of the World War II cruiser USS Indianapolis and her heroic crew. So, Bill, I'm excited about our conversation. Welcome to Principles with Cory and Logan.
Me too, Cory. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, Bill, I know you are a consultant right now, and you've got a book that we'll talk about, and I want to mine out some gold of your leadership is what I want to do. But tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get to this point? And just share a bit of your story with us.
Yeah, out of high school, I joined the Navy just as a regular enlisted guy. And then I applied for Annapolis, the Naval Academy, because I decided I wanted to be an officer, because I really wanted to be an astronaut. That didn't work out, but I got accepted into Annapolis, and then did my 4 years there. Went into the submarine force when I, failed my eye exam, and so spent most of my Navy career bouncing back and forth between sea duty on a submarine and shore duty in the Pentagon. And so those were the places I ended up going back and forth. That's how I found myself in the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001, which was a very bad day. But my sea duty on submarines was always fascinating, interesting. And I had the privilege of commanding a submarine, USS Indianapolis, which is how I got to know the World War II cruiser survivors of that USS Indianapolis so well. And in fact, we just lost one this morning. There's only, I think, one survivor left out of the 316 that survived the sinking of that ship. Of course, that ship was talked about in the movie Jaws. If you've seen that movie, it's Quint's character talks about it a bit. So I've had a very weird life. I'm lucky to be alive in some ways, but I'm very fortunate to have been benefited from a wonderful career.
Yeah, that's all right. So I've got just maybe a weird question for you, but
Sure.
I've always kind of been interested in the submarine stuff. If you could explain what it's like being on a submarine, what is that actually like to someone who knows nothing about submarines?
Yeah, the interesting thing is people who get claustrophobic don't fall into here for submarines. Yeah. So you can't get recruited into submarines. So when you get on board, people generally don't have a problem with being closed up and underwater. That's not generally the problem. The thing that people have a problem with is not seeing the sun. Back in the days when I was going to sea on submarines, of course, we didn't know how important sunlight and vitamin D was for things like bone health, right? And just like you'd be underwater for months, not getting any vitamin D at all. And nobody said, look, you need to supplement your vitamin D because, and that leads to long-term health problems, but we didn't know it at the time, right? And so being isolated with a bunch of guys as it was back in those days, we now have women on submarines too. Guys get kind of hard and a little bit cynical. You find weird ways to entertain yourself almost by harassing other people, right? You get a bit short-tempered. That's probably not surprising. But it was a very rewarding career. You do things that you can never talk about for the rest of your life. Yeah. I'll never be able to say what I did when I was on submarines. And you can kind of make peace with that, and you're proud of that. But on the other hand, you can't brag about it either. So it's kind of a weird environment that I'm glad I did, but I'm too old for that stuff now.
Yeah, man, that is awesome. So you led at pretty, you said you were commander of that submarine, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've led in the military space at a high level, and then you're a CEO of a corporation. So you've led at high levels in the military and in industry. Just kind of curious, any similarities? I know the principles may be about the same, but how do you lead differently in those two settings? I was just kind of curious there.
Cory, honestly, the thing that surprised me the most is there were more differences than there were similarities, right? Even from the leadership standpoint, as you said, I led at a high level. I led a submarine squadron of 6 submarines, 1,000 sailors or so. And you would say that, well, heck, if you led at a high level, in the military like that, that leadership style should be able to translate well to industry. And it turns out it doesn't. And I joke with my active duty friends, leadership is hard, but it's even harder when you're leading people who can actually quit. And that's not something I ever had to worry about on my submarine or in my submarine squadrons, right? And so and the reason this becomes an issue is because the military does a really, really poor job of preparing people to enter the civilian workforce. It's not their fault. The people who are doing the training have never done it. And so they don't know what they don't know. And so what they end up doing is telling you things that are just completely wrong, like all your future employer wants from you is good leadership. That's absolutely wrong. In fact, that's not even true in the military. You can't go into, like, let's say, command of a submarine with only good leadership and succeed, right? You need a whole lot more than that good leadership. You need to actually know something about that submarine, about the environment you're going to lead in, about the people that you're leading. And so that statement that we all want to believe when we're leaving the military, all your future employer wants from you is good leadership, turns out it's a complete lie. And it sets veterans up for failure because they think they have what it takes to succeed, when in fact there's a lot of work they need to do really well in industry. Now, can they just kind of get by? Yeah, they can get by. But if they want to succeed to the same degree that they succeeded in the military, they basically have to think about it like they're starting over again. And the company can help with that too. And I spend half my time talking to veterans that are going to transition industry and half my time talking to companies that are recruiting veterans, because every company is proud of the number of veterans it recruits. And what I say to them is, have you taken ownership for that veteran's success? Have you helped that veteran figure out what they need to succeed? How many of those veterans are still with you after 5 years? And if you don't know the answer to that question, then you're failing those veterans. And so if you really want to be proud and patriotic, do what it takes to help them succeed, not just hire them.
Yeah. Wow. You said something in there that I thought was really powerful. You said it's different leading people who have the option to quit.
That's right. Yeah.
Lead, I would think, and communicate. And, things that I know about military is definitely there's some skill sets. I'm an entrepreneur, and most of my time, my whole life has been spent in the business world. There are definitely attributes that are attractive about people that are coming from military. You got discipline, you got work ethic, you got wisdom. But I like what you touched on too about it just isn't automatic. One of the things we talk about in leadership is that one of the requirements is competence. And
Absolutely.
You mentioned that. And I think we fail people, and I know you're going to talk more about that, fail people when we don't train them in the competence, bringing out the skill set of that. So if you had a suggestion for somebody who's, bringing somebody on that's transitioning from a business standpoint, what would some of your suggestions be?
Yeah, I find that sometimes the business person hiring the veteran is a little intimidated by the veteran and is unwilling to talk to them the way they would talk to any other new hire. So sit them down and say, look, I know you've done a lot in your life, and I'm grateful for that. And by the way, if you want to say thank you for your service, that's the time to do it. After that, I don't recommend the employer say it. I recommend that they not say it, because everything that they do to separate that veteran employee from all the rest of their employees is not helpful, right? So you want to, treat them just like you treat everybody else, but sit them down and say, look, in this environment, this is the way we lead. You're the kind of leadership you probably exercised in the military is what we will call operational leadership. It's where you need something done quickly without a lot of questioning, right? And veterans generally tend to be pretty good at that. But on a day-to-day basis in a company, that kind of leadership can be very off-putting, could be very suppressive to the employees, the other employees that are working there. And so it can be a big problem. So veterans need to learn how to, number one, lead differently. And I tell the companies, don't be afraid to tell them that. And maybe you're going to get the, no, I get it. That's not the kind of leader I am. But I got to tell you, I've hired hundreds of veterans. I've had thousands of veteran employees in my companies. All of them say that. And then when it comes to exercising leadership, they'll kind of fall back on what they know. And then you have to pull them aside and say, look, I thought we had that conversation, that's not the way we're going to do it here, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is make sure they understand what's important to the company and what it's going to take for the company to succeed and what their role is in that. Because I guarantee you, when they're in the military, they understood their mission. And they may be led to believe, like a lot of government people are, that when you're in a civilian company, there is no mission, or the mission is just making money, or something like that. And they need to understand that stereotype they might have developed while they were in uniform or in government could be completely wrong. That the company probably has significantly more altruistic ambitions than they were led to believe when they were on active duty. And that's another thing you need to help them understand.
Yeah. So what I heard you say, and kind of when you're talking about number one, is kind of just as an entrepreneur, as business owner, or whatever, just out of respect for what they've done in the past and out of service, we tend to coddle or compromise instead of speaking to them directly or trying to lead them well, and it ends up being a disservice to that individual. It sounds like
that's exactly right. And this fear or intimidation, in particular, the managers who've never served in the military, who are very patriotic, and and I'm very grateful for that patriotism, by the way, who have respect and admiration for those, let's say somebody who came back after 5 tours of duty in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? So it's wonderful that they're respectful for that kind of service. But then if they don't say, got it, but let's help you succeed here too, and here's how we're going to help you do that. If they fail to have that conversation, they're in fact letting that veteran down. It's exactly what you said, right? And so it's not doing them any good at all to mollycoddle them and lead them to believe that they have the skills necessary to succeed in the civilian job when they likely don't.
Yeah. And that really speaks to me, because I can imagine myself, just out of respect, not intentional, but out of respect, doing that. And that really is a disservice to them as a leader. And I was just kind of curious, from the opposite end of the standpoint, you got somebody, we've actually got several people who listen who are kind of in that position where they're transitioning and they're looking or about to transition into that. Maybe any thoughts for them to kind of set them up for success as they go out and looking for their leadership role or whatever they're going to do in their next step?
Well, the reason I wrote my book is with those folks in mind, because I got tired of doing the counseling one by one. And I thought there needs to be a more efficient way to do this. Let me write all this stuff down. And before I was done, it was like book size. So, and so that's exactly why I wrote the book, for those people. And then I realized I actually had somebody from industry say to me, I read your book, even though you didn't write it for me. I'm a recruiter, and I recruit a lot of military veterans. And, I got great value out of the book too. And it hadn't occurred to me that would be true. And so I said, you know what, now that I think about it, you're right. When somebody that's a recruiter or hiring manager reads my book, it's like listening into a conversation between two veterans, one that's succeeded in industry and one that wants to. And so that's helpful to that industry person to know what the veteran who succeeded is telling the one who's transitioning now. So I do encourage folks that have never served that are hiring veterans to read the book as well. But the fundamental issue is you need to start early. You can't say, well, I've got my orders. I'm separating next week. What do I do now? Or say, well, the military teaches us what to do. Because in fact, what the military teaches you is a load of nonsense. It's going to hurt you more than it helps you. And it's, again, I keep saying this, it's not their fault. They're required to do this. They award contracts to the lowest bidder, and the people who give the training aren't the people who should be given the training. It's just the way it is. You have to accept that. Learn from people who've actually done it, not people who are reading off of a curriculum about something they've never done.
Yeah. I love what you said starting out there. That's the whole reason you wrote the book is I know what you mean is to increase. You've got a message and a way of helping people, and you want to spread that out to as many people as possible. And I think John Maxwell, I heard him say one time, that's the reason he wrote books, is to be able to influence people he'd never be able to meet. And
exactly. Yeah.
Powerful point right there. I love leadership, love talking leadership. And again, you've led at high level in both areas there. Curious, as you've seen, is there any, what skills do you think, or maybe a skill would you recommend that's required to lead at a high level, whether you in military or in the business space?
Well, in both cases, there's some common skills. And one of them is you need the ability to visualize first, and then articulate the mission and ways that are going to resonate with the people you're trying to lead. So in the military, it's easy. It's defending the country. It's, so it's been kind of, the vision's been articulated for you. But, trying to communicate that in meaningful ways to everybody who's in your unit becomes a little bit more of a challenge, but you start with a head start. In industry, it may be up to you to define that mission. That's the first part. And then second, do it in a way that is meaningful to the employees, so they don't believe that their mission is putting money in your pocket, right? Because nobody's ever going to get motivated about that. So they need to understand how it's all connected. That's common. Where things start diverging is in industry. The coaching style of leadership is almost always the approach you want to take, because you want to bring the employees along with you. In the military, there are opportunities to do that, but oftentimes you don't have time to use that method, right? It's more operational leadership or directive leadership. And even in industry, there are going to be times when you're going to have to rely on that operational leadership or directive leadership. So I tell people, don't abandon that skill, because there may be times when you need things to happen now in crises. And for example, we're going through, as we're recording this, Florida's being hit by a hurricane. And there are civilians all over this state that are using directive leadership at this moment, right? This is what I need you to do, and I need you to do it now. So that skill is necessary, but only in certain conditions. And if you overuse it, that skill that you've learned in the military, it will drive your employees away, which is why I say it's even harder when you're leading people who can actually quit, because that's what they're going to do. They're not going to be on board. They're not going to want to listen, and they're going to vote with their feet.
And clarity is so key, and clarity in that vision is so key. I like that. Actually, I'll share a super quick story here. We, in our physical therapy business, we were growing, and we were needing a new physical therapist. And the lady came in, and I laid out the vision for how we were making an impact, all the awesome things, and how she was going to get the opportunity to be a part of that. And she told me that that's not really what she was looking for. And I go home to my wife and I say, how in the world can you claim to be a physical therapist and not want to be a part of this?
Yeah, exactly.
And my wife, she shared something with me that was very powerful and profound that speaks to what you're saying. Is she said, well, not everybody wants to be a part of your vision. And whenever you're clear, whenever you clearly give directive, clearly give vision, it allows people to say, yes, that's what I want to be a part of. No, that's not. But
or no, yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it's best to do that during the interview process before you hire them, not after you hire them. Because, once you hire them and you find out, yeah, they're not on board with everything you want to do, yeah, that doesn't work too well.
Exactly, 100%. Well, I want to ask you about the Pentagon here in just a bit, but before we jump into that, I want to ask you more about your book. I would love for you to tell a little bit more about the book, because I know there are people that are listening that are going through that transition. And if you got one or two nuggets more that you'd like to share from the book, I'd love to hear that too.
Sure. The book's title is From CO to CEO, a practical guide for transitioning from military to industry leadership. And the key there is leadership. The subtitle is very important. And so, the book is intended for people who succeed in the military and want to succeed in the civilian career. And a couple of points I make is I talk a lot in the book about the timing of your transition. And there's pros and cons for staying in the military for a full career before you make the transition. And I do give those pros and cons as to whether it's good to get out after one or two tours of duty, or after you're able to retire from the military. There's pros and cons of each. One of the things that's really important for people to understand, though, is there was a book written a decade or so ago called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's an important concept to understand, even if you don't end up reading the whole book. And the premise of the book, which is absolutely true, is that the conditions that allowed you to succeed in your prior life likely will not exist in the next phase of your life. And we're talking about the operational environment, the human beings that were there to support you, the training that allowed you to understand the dynamics, all of those things that were true and allowed you to succeed in your prior life will not be there in your future life. And that is doubly true when you transition from the military industry. Everything's going to be different. In fact, I tell military officers, you ought to think about it. Doesn't matter if you're a general. When you leave the military, you're a second lieutenant all over again. And so that's the way you got to think of it. The other part of this, what got you here won't get you there premise, is the more successful somebody was in their prior life, the more likely it's going to be that they're going to assume that they will succeed in their next life. And in fact, that assumption, that confidence, can actually set them up for a higher likelihood to fail. And so it's almost like if you go in there not assuming you've been a success, you probably have a better chance of succeeding than if you go in there thinking, I got this mastered. I'm the master of life. I've knocked it out of the park in every job I've ever had. And so, that's kind of, it's going to be easy. And it's never easy for people who think that way. The other little nugget I would give you is that the thing that the future employer wants to see more than anything is something I refer to as an informed ability to learn. Okay, because knowledgeable hiring managers and bosses will know that the person who comes out of the military isn't going to have the skills necessary to succeed immediately. And what's going to be important for them is the degree and the speed with which they learn the new environment, the new job, and things like that. And so the ability for that transitioning military person to demonstrate that they can learn. And they have, right? And every time you get transferred to the military, you've had to learn a new job. And for better or worse, we get transferred a lot in the military. And it's kind of amazing to me that folks don't understand that this is like that. And your ability to demonstrate that you've been able to learn and succeed very quickly after taking a new military job, and use that as evidence in the resume, for example, of their ability to, the likelihood they're going to be able to succeed with this transition is really important. And I give advice for that in the book as well.
Yeah, wow, that's really good. As I hear you speaking right there, this quote just keeps coming to my mind as I hear that, and especially speaks to transition. And I'll just read you this quote. It says, "In times of change, the learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to live in a world that no longer exists. Right? It's that being willing to change and to grow. Yeah, that's good stuff. Good stuff. Well, so one more time, the name of your book, CO to CEO?
From CO to CEO, a
Okay.
practical guide for transitioning from military to industry leadership. Right.
Man, that's good stuff. Well, I see in your bio here, you talk about being at the Pentagon, and were you there on 9/11?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, about 100 yards from where the plane hit.
Yeah. Wow. Can you, what was that like? Like, I'm just thinking, I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, maybe what the nerves were like or what, just can.
Yeah. I mean, we knew the plane was headed towards Washington, and the only building in the DC area that was like the World Trade Center that was easy to see from the air and had a lot of people in it was the Pentagon. It has 20,000 people working in it. And so we kind of knew before the plane came in that one was coming, and we kind of knew that we were the target. And in fact, I said it out loud before the plane came in, but we did hear the plane as it, obviously on full throttle come in. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it. I was in an outer ring office, so I did have a window to the outside, but the plane hit, laterally from where I was. So where I was looking, I couldn't see it come in, but it was obvious. The building shook, could hear the explosion, the impact. And of course the halls filled up with smoke and stuff like that. And I ended up running around the outside and to the point of impact. And you could see the plane inside the hole in pieces, obviously burning. And initially those of us that responded to the point of impact were outnumbered by the injured that we encountered. And so we worked really hard to try to get people out. After about 20 minutes, though, the fire was too bad, we couldn't get back in. And then I talk about the irony is that everybody was saved that day were saved by people who were there when the plane hit. And when by the time professional rescuers showed up, there was nobody left to save. And that's kind of it was one of the worst days of my life, obviously. And it was 4 hours before my family knew I was still alive because the cell phones didn't work. And it was a tough day, and I was lucky to have survived. Many of my friends didn't. They got killed. And so, that's really all you need to know.
Yeah. Well, curious, as you said, information came in. What were some of your first thoughts whenever you knew, like, oh, we probably are the next target there? What were some things fired across your mind?
Well, of course, you don't know which direction it comes. The Pentagon is a Pentagon-shaped building. It's kind of round. And so you have no idea which part of the Pentagon it's going to hit. Yeah. And it hit the part that was next to the part I was in. But, so even though it's coming in, what do you do?
Yeah.
You could run from a place that's going to be safe to a place that's going to be hit. I mean, what do? Do you evacuate the building? No, we're the Pentagon. Right, where we control the nation's military. You can't run away, although people did run away once after the plane hit. But the building was never abandoned. The National Military Command Center stayed operating the entire time. Our Navy Command Center got hit, and that's where some of my friends were killed. That was kind of it. But then we went back to work as soon as the fire burned for 3 days, but we're still working in the building while the fire was burning. And so you do what you got to do, right?
Wow. How about that? And I know you mentioned that's about all you could share about that, but as you've reflected on that, we talk about experience is not the greatest teacher, but evaluated experience is. And in the vein of leadership, any leadership lessons you've learned kind of from that experience that you've kind of applied for yourself?
Yeah. Everything was strange about that day. Obviously, the big difference between New York and besides the massive loss of life in New York compared to the Pentagon, we lost, 160 something, and they lost 2,800 something, was the operational chain of command, is the military expression. In New York, pretty much everybody worked for the mayor. All the various agencies had a single line of authority up to the municipal government of New York. In the Pentagon response, the city of Arlington was technically in charge because the Pentagon had handed over the management of casualties to the city of Arlington. But when that decision was made, people were thinking about heart attacks and EMS and small fires and things like that. They weren't thinking about the worst terrorist attack in the American history. And so we had a lot of different agencies respond: federal, FBI, even the Secret Service responded, National Park Service. Many local municipalities, Fairfax County, DC, all the way up to Delaware, and state governments, the state of Virginia, the state of Maryland, the District of Columbia, and nobody had authority to manage those various entities. And what I learned about leadership that day is a guy showed up. He was an Army general. He was an active duty 3-star by the name of John Van Alstyne, who had no authority because he wasn't in the chain of command for all these civilian agencies, but he was able to exert his moral authority to kind of get them to work together. And people were willing to listen to him, whereas big Fairfax County may not have been willing to listen to little city of Arlington. And I'm making that up, but I mean, as an example, but among the municipalities, one might say, hey, look, we're more equipped for this than you are, and we know we have a better way. We know a better way to do this than what you're telling us. Nobody questioned the Army general, who had no technical authority, but had moral authority. And I think that was a great lesson from that day.
Yeah, that is a great lesson right there. And I love what you said, the moral authority right there. When situations arise, that's where you see the people who leadership arise up when opportunities come.
That's right.
And yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's incredible. You made mention earlier in our conversation about being on the submarine, and you're talking about being able to get to meet some of the ones on the cruiser there. I'm not very familiar with that story there. Can you share a little bit about that, the USS Indianapolis?
Yeah, the movie Jaws talks about it, but only as it pertains to sharks. And most of what they say in the movie is wrong. But that's the way most people know about the USS Indianapolis. They delivered the atomic bomb to the island of Tinian, the one that was dropped on Hiroshima. And then when they were on their way from Guam to Leyte, they were sunk by Japanese submarine I-58. And they spent nearly 5 days in the water before they were rescued. About 800, there were 1,200 of the crew, about 300 went down with the ship when it was torpedoed. So about 880 were alive in the water. But after nearly 5 days in the water, only 316 survived. And so, I'm now, the survivors pulled me into their sphere in 1998 when I was still captain of the submarine in Indianapolis. And so I've been working with them ever since. It was my great honor to know them. I helped them a little bit with the exoneration of their captain, who had been court-martialed after World War II for the sinking of his submarine, or the sinking of his ship by the Japanese submarine. And so I've been with them ever since. I'm now chairman of their legacy organization. And it's a great story. There's a good book that came out in 2018 called Indianapolis. Just that's the title, and then long subtitle, the 55-year effort to exonerate an innocent man, I think is the subtitle. But it tells the complete story, and it's very much worth reading, and I do recommend it.
Wow. How about that? That's good stuff. I like that. And I like that. I wanted to ask you about, in leadership, there's often challenging pieces and parts of your day. And I think, I know I've mentioned John Maxwell a few times, but John talks about there's no 2 great days in a row in the life of a leader, because, there's challenges there. And I would like to hear maybe some lessons you've learned from your own personal failures. You don't have to go into too detail on any of the failures, but I know for my own self, some of the greatest lessons I've learned are for my own failures there. So anything on that you could share with us?
Yeah, the first one is to recognize the failure. I mean, that's almost the most important bit.
Yeah.
When I transitioned to my first company out of the Navy, I came into a job that was called a leadership development program. And it really rankled me that they thought I needed my leadership to be developed. That was kind of my first mistake, because I'd led at a very high level in the military. And what it was really about was creating a business vision and then aligning people around that vision. And it was a great program. And I got promoted very quickly. And I thought, ooh, I'm doing great, just like I did in the Navy. And it was wonderful, because in the Navy, you kind of have to wait your turn to get promoted. You're assigned a number, and you can't get promoted before your number comes up. And in industry, I was promoted before maybe 20,000 people that had been there longer than me. And so I'm loving this. But about 6 months after that, I get a call one day, and it's my boss's boss, the guy who kind of was my mentor. And he's saying, and his first words out of his mouth were, "Bill, you're screwing this up." And it was like, I had no idea that I wasn't doing a great job. And so he went down the list of my failings, right? And it was like kind of, grip yourself moment. And, what are you going to do about this? And obviously I could have got pretty agitated and blamed everybody else for not supporting me, because I'm the new guy, and I'm only just a few months, or not at that point, I think I was in more than a few months, but I'm new to industry, and why haven't people told me this? And how come it takes you to, and it was one of those things where maybe I was a little bit intimidating to them, and my boss and the people around my boss. And so my boss's boss took it upon himself to have this talk with me. And so I learned a lot of lessons from that. First of all, I wasn't sufficiently self-aware. Second, I thought I knew what it was going to take to succeed, and I was wrong. Third, I had to go talk to these folks. I was going to say confront them, but that's not the right word. And say, look, why didn't you tell me? Don't be afraid to talk to me. What's going on here that you're afraid to talk to me? And so I learned a lot from that. And fourth, I just swallowed my pride. For the first time, I'm not hitting it out of the park. And, what am I going to do to fix this? And I'm going to take it very seriously and do what needs to be done. I told my wife, pretend I'm going on deployment again, because I'm going to be working really long hours until I figure this out and get this right. Either that, or I'm going to have to start looking for another job, which I don't want to do, because I really like it here. So that was a huge lesson on leadership from somebody who had been practicing leadership for over 20 years at that point.
Wow. That's really powerful. I love what you said there. First, becoming aware, right, of the mistake, and how easy it is that we just go through. And you hit me, brought back memories to one of my lessons I learned. I was working at a physical therapy clinic. Anyway, it came time for one of those performance reviews, that time of year. And the guy checked me average on everything. And I thought I was exceeding expectations, right? And but it was really a gut punch for me. It like you said, it really helped me to become aware that I was actually just showing up in your areas of giftedness. You can sometimes just show up, and because you're good at it, people pat you on the back and say that's really good. But really help me understand.
There's that old saying that showing it up is like 80% of getting there, and that's not true. That's like 20%. Anybody who thinks like that is going to lose. That's just the way it is. Yeah,
exactly. Right. And what that really helped me was that I was just showing up, that I was compromising some strengths and gifts and talents that I had, and I was just winging it and not working for it. And man, that's a powerful thing you just said. That's really, really good. Well, Bill, you've added a ton of value, and I know we're getting right at time, but I want to, if somebody wanted to reach out to you and connect with you, what's the best way they can connect with you? And then if they wanted to get the book, how do they get the book?
Well, the book is everywhere. It's on Amazon and whatever, Barnes and Noble, and Amazon controls the world. So, and that's the easiest place for people to get it. So I have to say that. It's also an audio, and it's an ebook. So if Apple Books is your thing, you can find it there as well, or Kindle or whatever. But to connect with me, I do have a website. It's William Toti, and Toti is spelled Toti, williamtoti.com. And my email address is there, and send me an email and I'll respond.
Awesome. Well, guys, I hope you connect with Bill. There's tons of good stuff there. And even if Bill shared something in here that spoke to you and you want to comment, feel free to do that. We'll pass that along to him. And Bill, last question I have for you. If somebody's listening and you really spoke to them, and what's one thing you want listeners to take away from our conversation today? If there's just one nugget that you could leave within them, what would that be today?
I've heard you say in another podcast, Cory, that it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And that's the basic philosophy of servant leadership. And if there's one lesson, that's probably the one. And you need to really ascribe to servant leadership. If you're going into the civilian, into your transition, whatever job it is, even if you're not coming out of the military, if you're going from one civilian job to another, and it's all about you, it will always be only about you. And that's not going to get you, I think, where you probably want to be. And I have that conversation with people who want to work from home. And I say, that's good for you. I get it. But if it's all about you and you're not willing to sacrifice something for the company, then don't be surprised when you never grow beyond where you are today. And so, particularly in face of people like you who can't work from home. And I ran several manufacturing, businesses where the people working there can't work from home. Yeah. And so put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself, what is it? So it needs to be about thinking of yourself less. And I think that's going to take you where you need to go.
Absolutely, man. I love that. And I could hit that on replay a bunch of times right there. Servant leadership. And I think the thing about leadership, a misconception about leadership is that it is all about me, that I'm the one to be served, but that's not the case.
Some of the worst leaders I ever worked for were highly charismatic. And you really couldn't help but love them, right? And then they would lead you into they would lead you aground, use the submarine expression, right? And it's not about you. That's the point.
Not about you, man. That is great. That is a great point. If I'm gonna second what Bill said right there. If you're interested in leadership, whether it's in military, whether it's in the corporate setting or entrepreneurship, if you want to be a great leader, get over yourself. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about the team, right? Man, that's good stuff, Bill. I really appreciate you. You've added a ton of value to us. Make sure you guys connect with Bill. And again, like I said, if he shared anything that stood out to you, you can comment below. We pass that along to him. I'm going to put Bill's, he said his email and where you can find the book. I'm going to put that in the show notes there. So
that'd be terrific. Yeah. William@williamtoti.com is the email. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll put that in there for you guys and you can connect with him. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I know it added value to you. Make sure you like and subscribe. That way you can stay up to date with any episodes that are newly released about Principles with Cory and Logan. Hope you guys have an awesome day, and God bless.